I found out about Berserk Boy largely because a bunch of Mega Man fans seemed to be excited about it, which in turn got me interested as well. I figured I'd get it immediately and do some videos tying it into Mega Man. Then I played the game and it wasn't nearly as Mega Man-esque as I was expecting, which isn't a bad thing. I figured the best way to kick things off would be to do what I did with Gravity Circuit and pick out the top 10 things that reminded me of Mega Man, since that did well previously, but with Berserk Boy, I have to wonder, can I manage that? You know what, I'm a creative guy and I played Ace Attorney, so I know how to BS. Let's give it a go. I'm Wes the Explosion, and yeah, some of these are gonna be a stretch. Another thing I can't do this time is count down from the most tenuous connections to the ones that hit the hardest, since the most obvious influence is gonna come up several times in this list. The main gameplay mechanic is that you get 5 transformations you can swap between at any time. And that's just Mega Man ZX, the first one at least. While you could technically get 2 bonus forms in the Capcom title, for the most part, you do just have 5 that you're primarily messing around with. And just like in ZX, there's also an extra human form that you're probably never gonna really use. Though, unlike ZX, that would just throw in parts where you had to crawl for a few feet to make sure you never forgot about your mundane form, Berserk Boy makes it so that once you clear the tutorial, you literally never have to swap back to it again, unless you want to do some sort of crazy challenge run. There's also a gauge that you expend to use some of the special abilities for each form, which is shared across all of them, can be refilled with certain power-ups, but also comes back at a set rate automatically, just like Model A. And much like ZX, whereas all 5 transformations have their uses, can in some instances break the game, and some players might fixate on certain ones due to preferences, the easiest to use that can carry you through the majority of the game is the default form. ZX is ZX, and here, Lightning Justice, which may or may not be the actual name. Anyway, this is good, since it's the one that you're guaranteed to have the longest, and also what's all over the marketing. And just in case all of that isn't enough, you yell out, "Go Berserk!" to activate the transformation, which has similar energy to Mega Merge or Rock On. Let me stagger things by sprinkling in some of the weaker examples in between the better ones, rather than grouping them all together. This one takes place endgame, no, I think technically post, so feel free to skip ahead. If you don't really care though, we get a boss rush. Yeah, I mentioned this for Gravity Circuit too. It still feels Mega Man inspired though, since there's 8 of them, even though there are more than 8 bosses, but only 4 of them feel like actual bosses, while the rest are more sub-bosses. One of the ones used is just a simple room that has multiple waves of regular enemies, and I'm not sure if it actually makes sense plot-wise for the actual bosses to come back, so it really feels like they wanted exactly 8 for this. Like it was a rule someone established in 1988. Most, if not all of them, also have weaknesses to specific types of attacks, though how elements work aren't quite as set in stone as they were in Zero ZX. So yeah, while it feels a little lame to rehash this and Mega Man certainly doesn't hold the patent, you know what? I'm sticking with it. Did you know that Inti Creates made games after ZX? Yeah, it's true, and the main series they produced, containing perhaps the company's mascot, the titular Azure Striker Gunvolt, because I guess Gunvolt can be a name. In it, you can tag enemies with your bullets, then fry them with electricity after they've been marked. Here too, you can ram enemies in Lightning Justice form to attack and create a link with them, then follow up with a blast of electricity for some bonus damage. Each form and primary antagonist also has a super attack that will freeze the screen with a character portrait before activating, similar to a few Mega Man titles, but most reminiscent of Gunvolt once again. Maybe it'd be more accurate to call this title more Inti Creates inspired. But getting back to ZX, 2 of the forms are very similar to the ones in those games, most notably Ice Kunai. Turn into a ninja to hang from the underside of surfaces, from thin, not quite platforms like wires, and for one of its attacks, just spam kunai, for a constant barrage of death. When hanging, they even get thrown out in a spread. That's not all this thing can do, but it's enough that anyone who's played ZX knows that this is pretty much just exactly Model PX, making it an instant favorite of mine. Then, just like in several of the X titles, as well as Gravity Circuit, there are various people scattered throughout each level that you can rescue. Unlike X, they're not civilians, but your allies, and they don't give you power-ups, but instead extra challenge stages that are just there for bragging rights, and bonus doors. Of course, some of these might have currency that you can use to upgrade yourself, so maybe it's not completely dissimilar. Anyway, find them and teleport them back to base, because you're just able to do that for some reason. But that does tie it back to Mega Man again. And speaking of that base, it serves as the hub. You can wander around, talk to NPCs for flavor text, but really, there's only 2 rooms that matter in the standard playthrough, much like the Zero and ZX games. And just like the first title in each series, there are segments in Berserk Boy where enemies break in and you have to rush around, taking them out to secure the base, making sure that the space is actually utilized and you actually explore the place. The group you're a part of is even called the Resistance, so the base definitely feels like an homage. Speaking of, there's a few small things that feel like subtle winks to Mega Man. There's one random NPC who jokes about giving K a buster, which feels a little strange in a game where the main method of attack is ramming into enemies. I guess the final form you unlock does have a gun, and the main villain has an attachment on his arm that can fire projectiles, but even then, the concept of a buster does feel very Mega Man-y. Samus has an arm cannon, and she doesn't call hers a buster, and I can't think of any other series that does either, though I'm probably just not thinking hard enough. Still, just a random line thrown in there does feel like a small reference to the creator's source of inspiration, which also has me thinking about the game's name, Berserk Boy. It's another alliteration, which can be abbreviated as a double letter, the first part of the name being 2 syllables, the second 1. This is either a real stretch or a really subtle nod. Then, for another form, you get an air-based green transformation called Soaring Wind. This is an easy one to link back to Model HX, though while HX could allow you to slow your descent to gently float to the ground, this one lets you fly freely, so it's like HX but on steroids. And hey, to follow it up, Soaring Wind's weapon is a shield that you hold down one button to twirl it out in front of you and reflect projectiles, while another sends it spinning around you. While its arc isn't quite the same, it still feels very Shield Boomerang inspired. Didn't expect the chain rod and gravity circuit, didn't expect Shield Boomerang here. And finally, what the hell? There's this one vehicle you get for a section that's like the Ride Chaser. You can dash, jump, and shoot, and with how you use it to cross a body of water and how some of the jumps are set up, it almost feels like a slower version of Jet Stingray's level. Sheesh. Next you're gonna say the bits where they swap to an arcade shooter copy Kirby. So there you go, 10 ways Berserk Boy is similar to Mega Man. Guess I grouped a few together so there's actually more than 10, but some of them were so basic that they didn't feel significant enough to list on their own. Like I said, this one wasn't nearly as much like Mega Man as I expected, but hey, I think that's great. There's a lot of titles out there that take inspiration that just come off as Mega Man, but this twist, and that's fine. I love Mega Man, so Mega Man but Rogue Light, or Mega Man but Pretty Anime Girls is great. There's something really special about taking the hook of one title, then distinguishing yours with its gameplay and style to the point that it has its own unique identity, and is able to stand on its own. This is another one that I plan on doing a review for, but as a bit of a preview, while I do have some gripes, they were all overshadowed by how much fun it was, and it'll be a pretty strong recommendation. The devs hit a few snags and tweeted out this message, so if I can sell anyone on it early, that'd be great. It's on pretty much everything still getting games other than Game Boy Advance. Only $20 and is the sort of thing that you can get multiple playthroughs out of, so I think it's worth the price of admission. But hey, what do you think? Have you played Berserk Boy? Plan on it? Any mega connections I missed? And are these types of videos worth doing? Guess analytics will answer that one. Anyway, thanks as always for watching, and maybe consider subscribing if you like platformers, especially Mega Man. Go Berserk!